Good morning. I am Nona Lyons here in Maine and recording some stories, beginnings of my family's history. This one is called Finding Ballynoneen, Recovering the Lives of Ancestors, Thomas and Mary Nolan Griffin, our great-grandparents. If you came in spring to Ballynoneen from the south along the main road, passing through this part of the stark Derrynasaggart Mountains, coming with the first flowering of green in Killarney, winding away in and out of the grey market square of Lisselton, then heading northeast as the land flattens towards Ballylongford, you would come to the crossroads at Lisselton. Katie Nolan's bright yellow pub is on the right, and just beyond is Behan's Meat and Produce Market. If you stopped to ask directions at Behan's, you probably would meet Mr. Behan, the butcher, his father, and his young black-haired son, Jack, who is just learning to walk and say hello. To get to Ballynoneen, they will direct you. Go out behind the store and take a sharp left, then follow the road straight up ahead and over the mountain. Ballynoneen is on the other side. We had missed the road 2 weeks earlier, but today we could see it, hidden behind what appeared to be a driveway. We were on our way looking for my great-grandmother's little hamlet called Ballynoneen, the place I had discovered only the day before, where she had lived for 40 years. As we took our leave from the Behan's, armed with sandwiches and sodas and good directions, we said goodbye as little Jack waved to us. Bob said, "See you again." Old Mr. Behan called out in that gracious Irish way, "You'd always be welcome here." Immediately the road behind Behan's turns, making a very sharp right along the edge of a set of houses. Then it straightens and heads due north in a line as far as the eye can see, rising in the distance as it follows the mountain, Knockanor, to its tip, a high place you cannot see beyond. On either side of the road, the land starts to rise up. Now in spring, yellow gorse appears everywhere among the soft green fields. Bog can be seen running through the yellow. Among it is a good grazing land. There are only a few houses and farms scattered along the side of the road. Some are very new and some quite fine, clearly not farmhouses. As you reach the top of the mountain, the land flattens and the eye catches the very small white and pink daisies that cover the field. Suddenly before you, the River Shannon gleams like a thin white line out to the Atlantic, as large clouds frame the landscape in a light rain. The land slopes down, and there clustered on the left is a little hollow of houses and farms, small fields and trees with the river beyond it. It is Ballynoneen. We just stop and follow the sweep of the river and gaze at the hamlet. It is lovely. We had come to Ballynoneen today searching for Mary Nolan Griffin and her husband Thomas, our great-grandparents. I had begun to be taken with the life of our great-grandmother Mary Nolan when I suddenly realized that she could have been left alone in Ireland after most of her children, including our grandmother Catherine Griffin Hennessy, had immigrated to America. Mary Nolan had 6 children. One had died in childhood, and Bridget, Mike, and Pat had all gone to America. Our grandmother Kate had joined her brothers and sisters in New York when Bridget asked her to come and sent her the fare. Cornelius Kahn had left later for America, but I did not know when, only that it was after 1888-89 when Kate had arrived. So I was curious about Mary Nolan and what had happened to her. I wondered how she had fared and what she would be doing. Where was she? Had she died? When? Where? How had she lived? I had been searching the microfiche in the library at University College Cork, UCC, which had 2 very important sources of data. Griffith's evaluation of the 1840s and 50s, the massive land survey of all of Ireland carried out so that taxes might be collected by the British, and the 1901 Irish census. But my searches for Griffins and Nolans through the small hamlets of North Kerry, including Ballynoneen, where our grandmother was born, had not turned up a Mary Nolan. It had turned up Griffins and Nolans, but none seemed right. No other information seemed connected to them. Reading the microfiche of the census, however, you could easily surmise some very sad stories, especially of women living alone or with a daughter or a son. Just the simple listing of mother-in-law at the end of a long number of family children made you wonder, how had they really fared? And I worried about our grandmother, so I decided to check the death records in Dublin. My searches in Dublin a month earlier at the Registry of Deeds had yielded nothing about Mary Nolan. Then I thought to shift the search to Thomas Griffin, Nolan's husband, our great-grandfather. I knew from our mother that he had died in his 40s of what was called dropsy. That was an unusually young age for what I was finding in the records. I did locate a Thomas Griffin in his 40s and asked the registry office for the full citation for the certificate, but they were so busy with other searches that the results had to be sent to me in Cork in the mail. When it arrived, the death certificate read, 5th of February, 1879, Ballynoneen, Thomas Griffin, male, married, age 44 years, occupation, laborer, cause of death, disease of the stomach, 2 days, no medical attendance, signature of informant Mary X. Griffin, her mark, present at death, Ballynoneen, 7th of April, 1879, signed James Moran, Deputy Registrar. I had never heard of Ballynoneen. I had known from our mother that her grandfather had died in his 40s, had been a fisherman, had been in business with another man, had their own boat, fishing on the River Shannon, catching salmon. He had died of dropsy, which I since have found out had something to do with fluids in the stomach, as the death certificate indicated. Armed with this information, I headed back to the university to check the 1901 census. I thought that our great-grandmother was probably dead by that time, but I would see if there were any other names of folks who could have been related. But when the microfiche rolled before my eyes for Ballynoneen, I was stunned to find as the very first person listed in the community, Mary Griffin. I hurriedly moved the microfiche to the next page for the details, and there listed was Mary Nolan, head of family, Roman Catholic, cannot read or write, 70 years old. Profession, occupation, general servant domestic, retired, widow, County Kerry, speaks Irish and English. Listed below was Cornelius Griffin, son, Roman Catholic, 29, agricultural laborer, not married, County Kerry, speaks Irish and English. Interestingly, it was officially signed by Mary Nolan, her mark as head of the family, not Mary Griffin. So Mary Nolan was alive in 1901, age 70, living with Con. Con hadn't yet left for America. The census records indicate they lived in a several-room cottage with 2 windows in the front of the house. They had a chicken house on the property. Mom had always said they had a small garden and raised chickens and pigs and had a goat. They sold butter and cheese at local fairs. And so here we were on a lovely morning in spring on the road in Ballynoneen, looking to find the place of our ancestors. It is a beautiful place and a delight to be in. It is really only a stone's throw from the Shannon. You can easily see how Thomas fished in the Shannon. When we were in Dingle on our way to Ballyferrada, a place at the end of that peninsula that we love and have stayed at several times, we stopped in the Dingle Library. There the librarian had shown me the collection of local history books. Among them I found a journal, The Shannon Side. There were 2 editions, one from 1993, the other to 1996. The stories were all written by locals of the Shannon River communities. One story was about fishing on the Shannon. It mostly told of the fishing partners, the pairs of men who regularly went together to fish. The author, too, talked of how sometimes the fishing was excellent and how in some years the salmon seemed to be very scarce. He thought it had to do with some natural cycles. What I realized is that our grandfather probably did fish the Shannon, catching and selling salmon as these men had. That was what was referred to as his business by our mother. It was a business, a way of making a livelihood, and in that part of Ireland men always fished with a partner, even if a boat's crew was made up of 3 men. I was also impressed to read that they used the same small canoe-like structure called a curragh that had been used in Dingle and on the Blasket Islands. These boats could be made of very light frame of wood encased in canvas that had been water-sealed with a tar-like substance. You can still see these today in a museum at Dingle Harbor and in the Blasket Island Heritage Center on Dingle. Of course, today fishing in Ireland is being carried on with modern boats and technology, and it is a good thing. It is amazing how treacherous the waters off the Atlantic were this past winter. Several boats ended up on shores or rocks, several dramatic rescues were made, and there was a loss of life. I imagine that fishing along the Shannon must have been wonderful for these men, a rich resource at their front door in a somewhat protected waters. I see from the Shannon side story that these fishermen in those parts fished off Beal Point within a stone's throw of Ballynoneen. Beal means mouth of the river in Irish. Mom always said her grandfather fished in the mouth of the Shannon. It is amazing how these little clues add up. I myself, in checking the records, always looked at how close the places of potential relatives of Mary Nolan or Thomas were to the Shannon. Our grandmother probably gave the translation of the Irish word to her children as she told the stories of her parents. I remember that Mom said she spoke very highly of both her mother and father, Thomas and Mary Nolan Griffin. Searching for Ancestors, Nolans and Griffins in Ballynoneen, County Kerry, Ireland. Sky above, clouds of multi-layered grays, some with blue and shots of white-lit sun. Down the lone mountain the land drops softly, with bird songs, straggling hedges, trees emerging. There a quiet, a stillness. There, where? No, not now, Nolan's Griffins. No, I'm afraid they haven't been here in a while, said Mr. Flaherty, who would have been a neighbor.